Fittingly, the first full decade of the Super Bowl era included the two best teams of that era. On January 21, 1979, the Steelers and Cowboys faced off in Super Bowl XIII, a game that saw Pittsburgh prevail, 35-31. In a game that was hyped up as the best Super Bowl matchup on paper, the game lived up to the hype, and still, 38 years to the day after its conclusion, it's regarded as one of the greatest championship games ever played. Here's 10 things you might not remember about that game, a game between two of the best teams of all time. It was the first rematch in Super Bowl history. Super Bowl XIII occurred 3 years after the Steelers and Cowboys first met in Super Bowl X, as Pittsburgh prevailed 21-17 on the strength of game MVP Lynn Swann's 4-catch, 161-yard performance that included his game-clinching, 64-yard touchdown reception. 17 years after Super Bowl XXX, Pittsburgh and Dallas became the first two teams to meet in the Super Bowl 3 times, as the Cowboys defeated the Steelers in Arizona, 27-17. It was the final Super Bowl played at the Orange Bowl. 5 of the first 13 Super Bowls were played at the Orange Bowl, which included both of the Steelers-Cowboys Super Bowls in the 70s. It also hosted Super Bowl III, when the AFL's Jets stunned the heavily favored Colts, 16-7. Dallas was the first defending champion to be the underdog in the following Super Bowl. A year after whitewashing the Broncos in Super Bowl XII 27-10, Dallas went 12-4 the following year, and blanked the Rams 27-0 in Los Angeles to advance to Super Bowl XIII. But the Cowboys were underdogs to the Steelers heading into Super Bowl XIII, as Pittsburgh went 14-2 during the 78 regular season and defeated the Oilers 34-5 to advance to its third Super Bowl in 5 years. It set a record for Hall of Famers in one game that still stands. A staggering 19 Hall of Famers took place in Super Bowl XIII, which included 9 Steelers players, 3 Cowboys players, coaches Chuck Noll and Tom Landry, Steelers owners Art and Dan Rooney, and Cowboys president, general manager Tex Schramm. The game also featured Hall of Fames and Dallas assistant coaches Mike Ditka and Ernie Stautner, whose number 70 has officially been retired by the Steelers along with Joe Green's number 75. Stautner played his entire 14-year career with the Steelers before returning following the 1963 season. Hollywood sissing motivated Bradshaw. Thomas Hollywood Henderson, the Cowboys' braggadocious linebacker, said that Steelers quarterback Terry Bradshaw couldn't spell cat if he spotted him the C and the T. Fortunately, Bradshaw didn't have to spell cat on that day, but he did throw for 318 yards and 4 touchdowns in the Steelers' victory, saying afterwards, "Ask Henderson if he can spell MVP." Henderson did have a big play, forcing a Bradshaw fumble that led to Dallas' only lead of the day in the second quarter. But Bradshaw, who turned the ball over 3 times in the first half, quickly responded, leading his team on 2 scoring drives to reclaim the lead at intermission. 5 Super Bowl records were set. While none of these records stand today, Super Bowl XIII did set temporary records for most total points scored, 66, most passing yards by one player, Terry Bradshaw, 318 yards, most touchdown passes by a quarterback, Bradshaw, 4th longest play in Super Bowl history, Bradshaw's 75-yard touchdown pass to John Stallworth that tied John Mackey's catch against the Cowboys in Super Bowl V, and the first game to have 2 receivers from the same team go over 100 yards, as Lynn Swann, 7 catches, 124 yards, 1 touchdown, and Stallworth, 3 catches, 115 yards, 2 touchdowns, enjoyed sterling performances. Austin Bradshaw's performance was the performance of Roger Staubach, who became the only other quarterback to throw for 3 touchdowns in a Super Bowl, as Staubach nearly rallied the Cowboys back from an 18-point deficit in the game's final minutes. Bradshaw shrugs off shoulder injury to lead the Steelers on the play where Henderson pried the ball loose from Bradshaw. Pittsburgh's quarterback injured his shoulder, but Bradshaw didn't miss a snap, hooking up with Stallworth on that 75-yard score on the Steelers' ensuing possession. Bradshaw would throw 3 of his 4 touchdown passes after suffering the injury that included a 7-yard scoring strike to Rocky Bleier to give the black and gold a 21-14 lead at intermission. Cowboys lasso Franco, while Dorsett dodged Steelers. While both teams possessed Hall of Fame quarterbacks, they also had 2 Hall of Fame running backs in Pittsburgh's Franco Harris and Dallas' Tony Dorsett, a Pittsburgh native who won a Heisman Trophy and national championship at the University of Pittsburgh. While Dorsett enjoyed a solid day, rushing for 96 yards on 16 carries and catching 5 passes for 44 yards, Harris struggled, rushing for just 68 yards on 20 carries. Harris did save his best carry for last, however, ripping right through the heart of the Cowboys defense for a 22-yard touchdown run that gave Pittsburgh a 28-17 with just over 6 minutes remaining. Tony Dungy made one of the biggest plays of Super Bowl XIII before he was a Super Bowl winning coach. Tony Dungy was a defensive back for the Steelers. Dungy, who led Pittsburgh with 6 interceptions that season, made one of the biggest plays of Super Bowl XIII. On the ensuing kickoff following Harris's score, Dungy helped force a fumble by Cowboys Hall of Fame defensive lineman Randy White, who didn't have a firm grip of the ball because of a cast on his hand. White had the ball only because Steelers kicker Roy Durrella slipped on the kickoff, causing the ball to not make it back to the Cowboys kick returners. After Dennis "Dirt" Winston recovered White's fumble, Bradshaw went for the throat, firing an 18-yard touchdown pass to Swan that gave Pittsburgh a 35-17 lead, just 11 seconds after Harris's touchdown. It gave Pittsburgh an unprecedented 3rd Super Bowl title before Super Bowl XIII. Only Pittsburgh, Dallas, Green Bay and Miami had won more than one Super Bowl. After the Steelers survived a gallant comeback attempt by the Cowboys in the game's final minutes, Staubach threw 2 touchdowns in the game's final 6 minutes. The Steelers stood alone as the only franchise to own 3 Vince Lombardi trophies. Today, the Steelers and Cowboys are still 2 of most storied franchises of all time. And while they've each had success since that game, Super Bowl XIII served as the height of both franchises' brilliance, as the Steelers and Cowboys, together, stood alone among the mountaintop of the NFL's greatest franchises.